the Trossachs Wild Apothecary podcast, where we explore lifestyle medicine through interviews with herbalists, foragers, foodies, healers and movement practitioners, discovering ways to empower ourselves to take charge of our own health and well-being. I'm your host, Rox. You can find out more about my online course, workshops and clinics at www.trossachswildapothecary.com. Please like and subscribe to the podcast and share. So today I'm talking to Anita, Ralph and Mary Tassell about their new book, Native Healers, Foundations in Western Herbal Medicine, published by Aeon Books. In it they talk about the human body and they talk about 15 herbs that are very safe for everybody to use. So I just thought I'd tell you the herbs that they're talking about. So there's chamomile, fennel, elder, lemon balm and meadowsweet, hawthorn, marigold, lime blossom, lavender, nettle, thyme, yarrow, dandelion, marshmallow and cleavers. So it's a really big book with loads and loads of information, some case studies, information about the bodies, food and nutrition and wellness. So hope you enjoy today's podcast. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I'm really excited to have you on the call, especially I've been really enjoying the course, the Heartwood course, and so I've actually put forward my starting the professional course now, so I'm starting in April. So.
Yay, well done, Rox. That's brilliant. That's wonderful to hear. And the foundation course itself is pretty intense, isn't it? There's lots going on, lots of information. So
yeah, it's been really good. It's been really interesting.
Great.
I particularly like the webinars actually, where asking the questions, and because it broadens it out quite a lot, I think.
Yeah, it's always, we love the webinars because you always we learn so much as well as tutors. We're always picking up little bits and bobs of information. The student body as a body knows all sorts of interesting information, so yeah, it's
and
great.
Asking questions, I think that's that dynamic interactive space that it brings out all sorts of things either that you didn't know or things you think, I should know this. I wonder what the answer is though.
So maybe we could start with maybe both of you telling me a little bit about yourselves, like how you came into herbal medicine and what your practice is.
That'd be lovely. Yeah. Shall I begin?
Yeah, go.
So I was at school and I discovered a book in a library about herbal medicine, and it was a German book that described how you could treat really serious illnesses with herbal medicine. And I just hadn't even come across this idea before, and it just absolutely lit up my imagination, and it made me discover, I suppose, that you could train to be a medical herbalist in the UK. So I knuckled down to get to my exams and be able to enrol on the course. At that time you needed to have A-levels in biology and chemistry, and I didn't have a A-level in chemistry, so I had to do an evening course in that. And then at the time, so I went straight from school to study to be a medical herbalist, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful journey. I've never looked back. So it's brought me so many wonderful things. So that's how I got into herbal medicine, really.
You have quite a busy practice. Where are you based? So?
I'm in Kent, so I work in my own clinic nowadays. I mean, when I first set up, I started by having a room, but within 3 years I was full-time, and so I've been a full-time practitioner of herbal medicine since 1993, because I qualified in 1990. And yes, I still work full-time as a herbalist. I collaborate with a gynecologist. Since 2006, we've been running an integrated gynecology clinic. But I also have just a general practice full of every type of person you can imagine. And now I have my own place that I can rent out rooms to other really brilliant practitioners, which it broadens my experience. I've always enjoyed working in a multidisciplinary setting, I love to do workshops and talks, and I do a lot of talks with the gynecologist to doctors and consultants about herbal medicine, just reaching out, reminding people that medical herbalists are really well trained, that we study conventional medicine, but also more traditional ways of looking at the human body and health, and that we know about plants. We know about lots and lots of plants. So I love talking about that.
Thank you. Mary?
Oh, yes, I'm kind of a bit more the standard route into herbal medicine than Anita, because Anita is one of those very rare birds that went into herbal medicine straight from school. You don't trip across too many. And certainly when I was at school, nobody knew that was a thing, you know, that wasn't available. So, and I remember doing careers advice, and it was like, oh, you can be a secretary, you can be a nurse, you know, you can work in a shop. Okay. So I went and worked in a shop, which was fine. But then I ended up working for the NHS in clinical biochemistry, and I was there for over 10 years and very much enjoyed that. But kind of by the end of it, it was very tiring, and I won't go into the politics of what was happening, but I thought, oh, I just need to change, but I want to remain within healthcare on some level. So I did a lot of kind of looking around at what the options were, and I looked at aromatherapy and, you know, the usual things. But I was very lucky, and I can't even remember how now. I just tripped across this course on herbal medicine and thought, I couldn't even at the point distinguish between the daisy and the dandelion, honestly. So on that sort of level, I was starting from ground zero. But I suppose on the more scientific side, I had all the anatomy physiology background. So, you know, we've all got our little gaps that we need to fill, haven't we? But yeah, and kind of it made sense to me. I could see why herbs worked. I could understand these plants have got active constituents in them that actually have been used for orthodox medicines. Of course they're going to work. It's always puzzled me why people don't think they're going to work. That's just like, it's common sense that they're going to work, you know, of course they're going to work. But I suppose, like a lot of people, when you go into herbal medicine, there is so much to it that you don't know. And it's a joy really to be putting that out there now, and to sort of, like Anita said, to be doing the talks and the workshops, because it's a subject area that can take over people's lives in all aspects, in terms of gardening, walking in the natural world, meditation, medicine, food. You know, it just takes your life over. A day doesn't go by where you're not thinking about plants on one level or another, which is very, very pleasing, but I think occasionally it can be slightly tedious for one's family. Going for a walk, it's going to take so long to get anywhere. She's got her ID book with her. Oh man.
Yeah, you find an interesting thing that, well, I was like, oh, this is so interesting. My husband,
yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Like a glazed look. Like, oh. So yes, I qualified in 2000. So I've been in practice for 20 years now, and I've loved every minute of it. It's because it's so, particularly if you're somebody who has a magpie brain, you know, who likes lots of just little interesting things and likes going down rabbit holes. Herbal medicine connects everything with everything ultimately. You'll never get bored. never. It's a joy. It's always feeding you random little tidbits. Yeah.
And is your practice is it Devon?
Yes, I'm in Dorset, in Bridport, Dorset. Yeah. We moved here about 6 years ago, and it really suits me now because I'm part-time rather than full-time, and of course I've got the sea a walk away, and I can spend more time, out there basically, which is very lovely. Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a big part of it, isn't it? Well, you think of a big part of it as getting to know the plant. Well, from my perspective, anyway, is getting to know the plants and knowing what medicines you can just go outside and pick.
Yes,
I like that aspect rather than just thinking of being like a I don't know, like a bottle herbalist, I guess.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, having the plants there, you're never alone then. You know them, you know their stories, and the folklore behind them as well, I think, is actually really important. It does play in a little bit to things like race memory, and it makes a connection, and yes, it brings the plants alive.
It probably gives you clues as well, I guess, to how people have used them throughout the centuries.
Totally, yeah.
I think that's one of the things I think that was so exciting about sort of getting together to put this book together, because I think I realised about 10 years into my practice that I think I'd gone on a really long walk, you know, like over several days, and I thought to myself, you know, if I injure myself or if somebody has an allergic reaction, you know, people would come to me and say, oh, have you got a medicine, Anita, for this? And I'd think, well, in my dispensary, yes, I have. But out on this walk, and I thought, that's crazy. And it's sort of, you know, so after I'd been in practice for a while, I began to do exactly what you said, you know, sort of think to myself, well, hang on a minute, what can I do? What's beneath my feet? This is herbal medicine. Many of the plants I'm using are growing all around me. You know, I should be able to use and link up with these plants.
Yeah, I particularly like the thing of like local herbalism as well. Like, because I know there's so many plants that you can use that's from across the world, but I quite like the fact that the plants that you know, maybe are most suited to what your needs are just right outside your door.
Yeah, and absolutely, and of course historically that's all people had. They had to use what was available, what was in reach. You know, Allen and Hatfield's book on the folklore of plant medicines in the UK is brilliant for that, because it really just gives you that insight into people didn't have money to go to a doctor. You know, they were up against it. The roads were terrible. You couldn't travel very far, so you know, you literally had to use what was within reach, and of course that's why all the different traditions, people up and down and around the country will use slightly different plants for different things, because they just used what was there. So yeah, very interesting.
Yes, it is. And I've got a copy of your book here.
Yay!
It's brand new, so I've just
sorry, we're very excited.
Maybe you could actually just have a wee chat, talk about it. And
certainly, yeah. Hang on.
Maybe you could tell me about how the book came about.
Oh well, yeah, actually the book came about because Anita very, very kindly and generously and lovely invited me in the first instance to co-author the Heartwood Foundation course with her, and the book is the offshoot of that. It's designed as a text to go alongside the foundation course, but also we wanted to reach out people, you know, the general public. We wanted a really good, comprehensive textbook, but an actually easy to use textbook that people can just take up and refer to and incorporate into their daily lives. And so, yeah, maybe Anita, you want to say a little bit more specifically about the plants we chose, because Anita had a big hand in what plants we featured. So I'm going to over to you for that, Anita.
Thank you. I think, the plants, for example, we sort of cover 15 plants in real detail, although there are many, many other medicinal plants within the book, of course. But the aim was that these were plants that anybody could use and most people could grow, and most people have growing around them. Obviously, we're in the northern hemisphere and there are some parts of the world where these plants don't grow, but I believe that herbs like dandelion are pretty much ubiquitous around the globe, and many of the plants that we talk about can be grown in almost any part of the inhabited world. So we were really keen to show how, you know, simple plants actually are sometimes just the most wonderful plants. And but I think also there's so much. I think it's wonderful that people are looking for more knowledge about herbal medicine, but being a herbalist is more than just acquiring knowledge. It's actually the acquiring of understanding. And so I think we really wanted the book to go deeper than this herb is for this, and you can use this herb for that. On the contrary, this isn't how herbalists work at all. And so many other commentators, researchers, medics, the media, they love to talk about herbal medicine, but they forget about the medical herbalist. And so we hope, as well as the native healers, the plants, we hope we've introduced the healers, the herbalists as well, very much in context with the plants, because there is a sort of magic, I think. I'm sorry to use that word, but I think it's sort of a beauty and a synergy that occurs between the plant, the herbalist, and the user of that medicine that is more than just knowledge. It's something extra. And so I suppose we sort of wanted to share that a bit, really, in the book.
Yes, well put, Anita. It's the broader context within which the plants are used, and the kind of that lovely natural web that envelops us all. We wanted to get that. Yes, it's not about if this, do that, if this, do that. It's about the big picture. It's about treating people as individuals, really understanding the plants on a deep level, and using accordingly. It's a different. I think it's slightly different to what people expect.
Yeah, because I was thinking, I think it goes into a lot more detail about, like, even talking about the body systems, which a lot of other herbalist books don't do. Maybe they talk about the medicine, like how you can make a medicine, but you don't talk about like the lymphatic system or the cardiovascular system.
Yeah.
Thanks for noticing that, Rox, because that is like really, really important. And I think a lot of people are a bit nervous about learning about their body. But as Mary sort of said, coming from that sort of biochemistry background, Mary sort of had this realization that, of course, herbal medicine works. And I think by gifting people a sort of a little bit of access to actually very contemporary understanding of how our body works is not actually too difficult for people to understand. They have a body, so therefore they exist within their body. And if we can share a little bit of information about how the body links together, how everything is interconnected with everything else, then that will help people make that leap from the herbal medicine being this is a cure for this and this will cure that, much more broadly into, hey, how can my body work better? How can I look after myself better and my family? And how can we, therefore, if I have an understanding of my body, then I might feel a little bit more confident about using herbs, because it all makes sense.
I think it's quite a good way to empower people in general as well, though, for like, even when you're going to visit the doctor or something, you can not have so much of that white coat syndrome and kind of feel a bit more like, well, I empower you to say what you actually think and what you feel, or
Yeah, absolutely. These things are so important, the broader perspective. Yeah,
that must really come into play in a family setting as well, I think. So inevitably, if you're a parent, again, knowing your body and trusting herbal medicine, just like you might trust the food on your table. You bring up your children and they inevitably eat what you eat. But again, if you're using the medicine yourself, if you know that lavender will ease an insect bite or a burn, and it'll ease a tummy ache, and it'll ease a headache, and you've taken it yourself. If you've taken it yourself many times, used it many times, you'll trust it, and then you can use it within your family for anyone else, knowing that you have a relationship with lavender.
Mm-hmm.
It's deeper than knowledge.
It's wisdom, knowledge, understanding, wisdom. Go down into that deep pool.
That's what the book, you're trying to encourage people to build this relationship with plants then, and this connection through all of these things. And
absolutely, just see the interconnectivity. Even if we go back to the anatomy and physiology for a moment, we've tried where possible kind of to show that different body systems don't operate in isolation from each other. They do interconnect and dovetail all the time. So, you know, I was thinking about this yesterday in terms of gut function, and actually a gastroenterologist needs to know about the nervous system, and needs to know about the immune system, and needs to know about the musculoskeletal system, and needs to know about, you know, and I remember going back to my student days, and they were saying, you know, if somebody comes to you with migraine, treat the gut. If somebody comes to you with gout, treat the gut. If somebody comes to you with kidney stones, treat the gut. If somebody, and it's so true. You know, we start there where we carry the outside world around with us. It's the liminal space between the outside world and the inside world is inside us, and it's kind of where it all comes from. That interconnectedness flows out from there. So these concepts are really important, not just to look at individual body systems, but to pull back and look at the whole as far, do some joined up thinking.
Yeah, I sometimes think that's what's missing in the wider medical world, because everything's in separate places, isn't it? And then they sort of look at one part of you, and then somebody else looks at another part of you, and nobody seems to join it all together.
Yes, yeah, it's very, it's a good system, but it's also, there are limits to it. You know, and people haven't always grasped the fact. You need to pull back, gift people with the gift of thinking, right? You need to think a bit more about this, pull back a bit.
And we're living in a time, aren't we, where so much interest in herbal medicine, so much interest in science, and we consider ourselves scientists.
Absolutely,
I think, don't we, Mary?
Absolutely.
But there's information coming out, whether it be about gut microbiome, which, you know, our herbal ancestors intuited without actually visually seeing, using magnification technology. They intuited this, but also there's loads of research on herbal medicine now talking about mechanism, about how plants work. And I think, again, that can throw people a little bit bizarrely, because it can say, well, this little compound which is found in these plants, you know, can be dangerous or whatever. And suddenly people are made afraid of the food that they're eating, or simple herbs that not only will be safe, but could probably save your life one day, you know. So I sort of feel that on one level we're opening up, everyone else is discovering the power of plants, but unfortunately tied into that is this very mechanistic view about isolated constituents that creates an unnecessary disconnect and a fear of plants. Well, if I take that, will it interact with that?
Yeah, it's one of my favourite areas in terms of plants and plant medicine is synergy, and in terms of how all these different phytochemicals interact with each other and interact with the human body, going back to that complexity again and the wholeness. And it's a big area that is just completely missed. You know, that just because something has got, let's say, for example, a certain type of pyrrolizidine alkaloid in it, oh, that's, yeah, terrible, you shouldn't use the plant, without, again, pulling back and looking at the whole, and also looking at the empirical evidence of what people have been doing for hundreds of years perfectly well and safely. I'd love to know how many people in one given year in Europe actually use comfrey internally or externally. We don't have the figures to say, well, you know, what is the risk benefit ratio? We don't know that, because so many people do just use it regularly in their lives. So we get false impressions, I think, sometimes from the media, particularly when research is on very specific compounds. You know, you get quite a false impression of the reality of the situation.
Yeah. I think that's why we do the plant tastings. That's why we've introduced them, because once you've physically tasted that plant, it helps you connect with your senses and reality, not the world of the microbe and the microscope, and not even that. Actually, it's gone way beyond that in terms of mass spectrometry.
Yeah. I find absolutely fascinating actually, I have to say, I love it. There's the little nerdy bit of me thinks, oh, this is brilliant. But there's always the need to pull back again. You know, there's always the need to pull back and put it in context with everything else, rather than just sort of take it as an isolated thing.
We use that term throughout the book, macro physiology, you know, taking that step back, looking at the whole. But I suppose at first you need to study the parts, but then of course stepping back and looking at the whole, whether that be the whole person and their physiology, or the individual constituents of the plants, and then the whole plant and how it might interact with us. That's an even bigger thing again, you know, and how we're interacting with the plants in nature.
Yeah, and when you're talking about that, you're also talking about food, don't you? Because you have a chapter on food as well. So it's not just plants as in herbal plants, but just all plants in general.
Indeed, yeah, anything you're putting into your body from the plant world. And I again, that's going back to why do we eat? The plants that we are eating with the intention of them providing us with vitamins and minerals actually do so much more. It's not just all about nourishment in the way that we conceive of it. It is about repair. It is about flow, keeping the body flowing, keeping the dynamics going. It is about keeping you well on all sorts of levels. So, you know, if you can take beautiful herbal medicine, but if your diet is totally rubbish, then you know, one thing's going to be fighting the other all the time. And we are healing ourselves with our food, of course we are. And I love the grey area that herbal medicine inhabits on that level. We've got 1 foot in medicine and 1 foot in food, and there's this big huge grey area where most of us at least perceive culinary herbs live, that we're using for all. But I mean, even with culinary herbs, you know, you use sage in a stuffing very deliberately to help the digestion, for example. There are all sorts of things that we're doing to aid body processes that we view as food, but there's so much.
There's quite a lot forgotten though, isn't it? I mean, I know because my dad's side of the family is from Iran, and there it's very much, you know, you'll use like dill on your egg to help the fat, and that's just like, you know, it's just known. But here
everyone knows that.
Yeah, exactly. But here it's not really something that people talk about so much, I don't think.
No. We've lost, I think, the taste for bitter, certainly, from the culture. You know, introducing people to the concept of the bitter taste and what it does for you in terms of the health benefits. It's like, and I'll say to people, oh, you know, it's like when you have a Campari. It's like, oh, that's why people and it's that knowledge has kind of been lost in terms of why are you eating what you're eating, what, you know, what benefit is that actually giving you above and beyond keeping you alive? Because actually it plays right into herbal medicine. And again, we have that false, I think, perception of medicine is here and food is there. And that never used to be the case going back centuries. And I think we talk a little bit, don't we, Anita, about receipt books, certainly in chapter 5, where the head of the household, and it's usually the woman, would have all her recipes, her food recipes, but she'd also have her recipe for a sore throat and her recipe for dropsy or whatever it is, all in amongst the food, because you'd be using turnips and apples and, you know, all sorts of things for those conditions as well as for your food. So that was going on an awful lot more in people's brains, and it's nice that we are still occupying that space. You know, that we're there, we don't see the division on the same level.
I love that every culture has that too, as you say. Yeah. You know, the dill in Iran is a really good point, and it's the idea for us about reconnecting people to whichever culture it is that they are sort of interested in, or maybe have sort of arisen from, and just reconnecting them actually with the fact that it isn't nonsense. Isn't it interesting how, you know, so often cooking may be part of women's work, and so often disregarded. Was something that Mary and I, when we were researching the course and the book, that Mary came across a medical research paper published on dill specifically actually rocks, and it poo-pooed it just said, well, it's just useless, it's just sugar water.
Oh,
I mean,
God,
what
yeah.
an extraordinary
Recipe for colic, wasn't it? My God, yeah. And it was actually paid for by the Royal Institute of Medicine or something. You know, it was a major body that published this paper, and it was so rubbish.
It had no scientific fact in it. In fact, it totally did not utilise any scientific evidence that was actually there about dill. It totally ignored the fact that there's research that has come out of Iran actually specifically on this herb, and it's been used in hospital settings with really good effect up against conventional medical drugs like tranexamic acid and so on, and it's performed as well or better with less side effects. So, you know, you just think, what is going on here, that if you like, the medical profession have got such power that they can publish an absolutely unpeer reviewed, you know, piece of data totally rubbishing a herbal medicine.
It was disgraceful.
Actually, yes, I'm sorry, I've got all cross about it again. But it sort of speaks to, you know, what we've been trying to do here, I suppose, as well, is sort of not let people be put down, you know, by their heritage as well, and what they bring from their family life and their ancestors all the way through, all the mothers that have given their children dill or drunk it themselves for it to go through their breast milk. Oh my goodness me. Let's give them a voice.
Yeah, raw.
So maybe that'd be a good time actually to transition through into childhood illnesses. Maybe we could talk a little bit about I suppose in a fairly general term, about herbs that you could use for different childhood illnesses, you know, like colds and flus, maybe fevers, what else, sore throats, coughs.
Yeah, well, the first thing that struck me was about your little alchemists club, actually, Rox, and that somebody had mentioned that their little child had in their feedback about your courses, you know, that they were actually picking sorrel and eating that even though they would eat no other vegetables. I sort of love that idea, you know, that first of all start with food, so that you know, if you've got a tummy upset, and we mentioned this recipe in the book, I think, don't we, Mary, about sort of pulping down some apples with some cinnamon and ground almonds and maybe some honey, and just you know, that you can ease diarrhea and an upset tummy with something really simple like that. Or that you can use chamomile for not just, you know, I suppose people sort of famously think of it as a sleep herb, but it is powerfully anti-inflammatory and can be mixed with other herbs or foods to make actually an incredibly effective antispasmodic for the gut, anti-inflammatory for the gut, wound healing herb to apply to the outside of the body, to apply to a conjunctivitis and earache. We cover throughout the book lots of different ideas actually about this, but that's something every herbalist would have done, I think.
For sure. I personally love it when people bring their children to me, because I find that's like a massive vote of confidence. It's one thing for somebody to choose to go and see a herbalist, but it's another thing again for them to bring their child, particularly a young child. You know, that's like giving you, okay, I trust you with my child. It's a really big thing, I think. And I also love the fact, okay, that child's going to grow up now knowing that there are options in the world. You know, knowing that herbs work, and to always think outside the box. There may be other ways of doing things. So I'm really quite victorious when a child kind of materializes in the room, and like, yay, hurrah. And I also find, and I think you find this as well, Anita, that children most of them respond so well. You know, their little bodies are, I suppose, are still settling down into a way of being, and therefore things can be corrected or pushed back really quite easily in most cases. It just takes a little bit of and you can get them on board, particularly if you you're in the nature of your practice, which mine isn't at the moment, but my previous one was, I would be making the medicines up while the patient was there. So with children, you know, you can get them to have a stir, you can get them to have a sniff, you can talk to them, and you can say, all right, and this is going to grow in your garden, get mummy to show you where this grows. And they totally get on board with it, and they're like making their Harry Potter medicines. It's just flipping brilliant. and of course we all know about what people call placebo effect, but is really a meaning response. You know, if you can engender that meaning response from a young age, that people are on board for life then. Oh, that was absolutely brilliant. That was magic. You used the word earlier, Anita. It's a little bit of magic, and it worked. We all need magic in our lives, no matter what our age is. But you know, if you can get a little bit into children from a young age, hurrah. You know, get them to grow that which heals them, get them to grow the marigolds and the chamomile, and they're a joy. I think they're a joy to treat. All but the most intractable illnesses they will respond to.
And for coughs and colds and things with children, it's sort of something I suppose again the herbalist feels really confident with.
Yes.
Because there are so many really nice medicines that can help a cough or a cold, you know, using elderberries and rose hips and adding blackberries and you can make a cordial or a oxymel. You can make things taste okay. And then, of course, a really important part of herbal medicine for coughs and colds are the bitter herbs. So many bitter herbs are really, really good for coughs and colds.
Yeah.
Sorry, big aeroplane going on.
Little things like sore throats as well with cough and cold. You can do things externally as well as internally. So maybe a nice little fomentation, you know, using thyme or sage or something, wrap it around their throats, little things like that. So they don't even have to take the medicine, or you know, just like, oh, I'm going to move that. That works quite well as well. We mentioned elderberry, but elderflower as well. Elderflower cordial, of course, is quite yummy anyway. So using things like elderflower, warming elderflower drinks, you know, you can get a lot of beautiful stuff inside small children. And of course, going back to the fact that they are so responsive, most of the herbs you are using for children, like the chamomile, like marshmallow, they're all very gentle and very, very safe, which is kind of one of the reasons we've focused on a lot of the plants we've focused on anyway. They're very safe, they're supremely safe to use, even for children. So there's plenty of room for manoeuvre.
Would you say that all the herbs that you've talked about in the book you could use for children?
I can't think of any reason why not. There might be one or two that you probably choose not to just because they're not really suitable, but there's no reason. I think most of them are safe, you know, and things like, I mean, we haven't mentioned lime flower, haven't we? And that's gorgeous for children, and it's one of the traditional remedies in France is to make a bath out of tilia, and for fractious or restless children, and just put them in the bath with the lime flower leaves, and how lovely. I mean, it just sounds like a spa treatment, doesn't it? I'm very partial to lime flower. But yeah, I don't think there's anything that would be contraindicated for children, is there, Anita?
I definitely don't think there is, but that's why we sort of chose the herbs. But I suppose there becomes a point where it is really useful to have a strong therapeutic relationship with a herbalist, because I suppose there's that, you know, you've got a child, they're poorly, you're monitoring a fever. You know, these are things that you know, can tip over into more serious problems later. So children are much more likely to present with fever, and if they get a high enough fever, then there's a possibility that they might have a seizure. They're prone to that sort of extreme reaction to a too high fever. But as we sort of have talked about again on the course and in our book, it's about management of a fever, and that can start at home. So you can give herbs. So there's a really important concept in herbal medicine called diaphoresis, meaning sweating, but more than that, it's a sort of tingly feeling that you feel on the surfaces of your body when you're sort of having a sort of shiver inside. And some herbs actually induce this, and it results in the blood vessels coming to the surface of the skin, cooling the body, but not so much that it dumbs down the immune response. So diaphoresis is just an amazing concept. So herbs like tilia, lime blossom, are diaphoretic, but also herbs with a bit more of a kind of practitioner edge to them, like yarrow, which we also cover as one of the 15 herbs. You know, again, you might use that within context of a therapeutic relationship of with a herbalist to guide you, but it can be used very safely, and it can be used in fever management. It's interesting because it's a bitter herb, and it's very, again, so that brings me back to that idea that bitter herbs for children can be quite difficult. So you actually need their trust and engagement. And that's where engaging young people early on, like you're doing, Rox, it sort of enables them to feel safe and confident, as we are trying to do with our encouraging people to do herb tastings, because then you trust the bitterness and it's okay. You find a way with it. And who would have guessed it? But if you look back in manuals of treating serious infection, I've got a lovely manual here called the Model Botanic Guide to Health, published in 1916, and it's I think it's its 21st edition. That's how practical and usable it was, and it's written by a doctor called William Fox, and he said it's sort of pretty straightforward to treat pneumonia, but he uses a lot of bitter herbs. Now, again, this is something that people would have intuited from ancient times, that bitter herbs seem to be the thing to help with a serious infection or fever. Herbs like thyme, hyssop, vervain, and actually I was thinking of, what is it, marubium, white horehound.
Yeah, there's a bitter herb.
A really bitter herb. And but now we literally in the last 3 years have discovered that the bitter taste receptor is found not only in our tongue, not only in our mouth, not even just in our digestive system, but throughout our body, and that it modulates our immune system. So I love, it was that sort of tension that we were talking about at the beginning, whereby modern scientific understanding of the body is also linking up with our traditional understanding of herbs, and it's that mechanism of action where you can see that bitter herbs jolly well might be very good for a nasty infection, but that means you've got to have trust, A, in the herbs, and B, in who's giving them to you, to take them for something serious like a pneumonia.
It's interesting how people, before all the science and they found out exactly how it works, how did they know, that the bitters, I suppose it's through trial, maybe through experience, I guess, but
co-evolution. Yeah. Absolutely, just co-evolution with, just living with the plant world. I suppose it's almost an osmosis thing, because we almost think that we're born and we grow and we've got to learn everything from scratch, and I don't think that's the case actually. We are intuitive beings, and also I think there is, this is my personal belief, but there is inherent knowledge that just needs to be brought out a little bit, maybe, rather than smothered by whatever culture we're living in. But I think it is easier than we suppose to actually just have that instinct for it, because it's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, actually. It's not a recent thing.
Yeah, it must be like passed down through that, that, what is it, that matriarchal
mitochondrial, you think,
the mother's line.
yeah DNA or whatever it is. Yeah
Like there's so many things that we just don't know about. It's quite
It's hard for us to imagine too, isn't it, what it might be like with no electricity, no cars, just none of our modern stuff, if we relied for absolutely every single thing our clothes. We literally wove them from the plants growing around us, and if we, had to catch animals and gather roots and berries, it's hard. We cannot take ourselves back there, I think, but that must have meant that you were so deeply enveloped within nature that it isn't such a huge leap to imagine that people did not, it wasn't just trial and error, but it was much more, as Mary says, instinctual, like all animals. We know that so many wild animals use herbs, and they actually have been, chimpanzees have been observed making a capsule of bitter herbs inside a tastier leaf to worm their whole chimpanzee family. It just means that we are part of that. It was there.
It was, we were so embedded in it that we were part of nature, and we see ourselves as separate from nature now, but actually we were part of it, and therefore you're just part of this massive web of knowledge. Very different. And it is hard, you're right, Anita, it is hard to kind of feel that sometimes now, but it is important as well that we try.
I think I used to worry, discovering herbal medicine as I did really young, I sort of thought, oh my gosh, it's really lost, and I used to worry that we would lose our herbal medicine. But I've come to the feeling that because it's true, because it really is true, then it's always going to be there to be rediscovered. And I was very grateful to do a master's degree at the Scottish School of Herbal Medicine, where we sort of really learned a kind of plant tasting method that has informed the sort of very gentle tasting method we've included in our course and our book, because I think that tasting is something that I remember reading that traditional people did. That I think about Black Elk Speaks, a beautiful book by a Native American, and he talks about how the plant speaks to you. Or Lyle Watson, writing in the 1970s, talked about a group of people that told him that they place the plant leaf in their mouth and then the plant tells them about itself. So
Madagascar.
Madagascar.
It was Madagascar. Yeah.
Is that what the book was called?
No, I think that it was one of the books that followed Supernature, his first book, but it involves his trip to Madagascar, and he observed an incredibly skilled medical system in Madagascar using entirely plant medicine, and wondered how this had come about in such a short human history period of time. But all the people he asked about it said that they had basically communicated with the plant. They had opened up lines of communication in a very deliberate and contemplative way.
Was that the quote, Anita, where he said we go out with our eyes half closed and our minds completely open? I think I remember that, and I thought, oh,
that's quite lovely.
Yeah.
Yes,
I kind of think as well, it's like that whole connection with nature. It reminds me of a seed. It can be dormant in the earth for centuries and centuries and centuries, and then given the right environment, it'll bloom again. So what you were saying earlier, Anita, about losing herbal medicine, I very much see it like that. I don't know whether it is ours to lose or to gain or to what have you. It just is what it is, and it will always be there for us.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like the concept of being able to communicate with the plants. I think it just makes sense, because like you said, we are part of nature, so it makes sense that we should be able to communicate with them the same ways you can communicate with anybody else. We just
absolutely. It's just a different form of communication, but it's a form of communication nonetheless.
And going back to sort of families, I guess that means, do we introduce children into plants into their lives young enough? I just wanted to make a quick mention of this lovely herbalist I met some years ago on the island of Crete. She lived up in a little village in the mountains, and she collected the herbal recipes from all the midwives on Crete about 40 years ago. She just went round and spoke to them all. And so a tradition in Crete was to bathe a newborn baby in a recipe of 40 herbs. So the first interaction that baby had with the world was a herbal interaction. And if that would just be such a beautiful thing to remind people of today. And I still give bathing herbs in my clinic to women expecting to deliver a baby, and suggest that they both bathe in the herbs. It's not 40, but it's a start. But I love the idea of beginning your engagement with herbs right there.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, there are a few different places around the world that do that. I do remember reading it about Native American Indians, certain different tribes. That's one of the first things they do. It's and it was a beech or a birch. I think it was a birch, type of birch, but that's the first thing the baby gets is bathed in the birch. They might have even had a little bit of birch sap. I think they were actually given a little bit internally to take. Yeah. So off you go.
Wow. Yeah, because I was listening to somebody Native American talking about how they think of plants as being part of their family.
Yes.
Each group have their own, sacred plant that's part of their family that they will.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I don't want to say, it kind of it gives it more reverence for the plants, that they're alive, they're conscious. I think not these sentient beings that are just lying around.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's that's that thing about knowing a plant so deeply that you do see it in that way. I think you could look back at sort of even our tradition here. You could look at the descriptions used in old herbals, even cold pepper, even as late as cold pepper in 1600. They talk about the virtues of a plant, meaning personalities, that it's like a person. They've got multiple aspects to their personality, and that means that you can get to know all different aspects of that plant's personality over time, and therefore they become like a person in your life.
And that really does happen, and going out on when you're going to do a plant study, and I remember this going back to the MSc, Anita, when we would go out, and you have to go out and choose a plant that you're going to do a plant study on. And I was thinking, oh no, how am I going to choose? But actually the plant chooses you. You just go out and the plant will present itself to you. You don't make the decision. But, okay, and that actually does happen. The plant does choose you.
And back to with using the medicines for children, how would you go about dosage wise? Because there's a few different systems, isn't there, of how to dose for children?
There are. Again, depending on the age of the child, but obviously if you've got a breastfeeding mum, that's your way in the first instance, But I will tend to just start with drop doses. I mean, I use drop doses on quite a lot of adults, let alone children, depending on what I'm doing, because I think drop doses can be really, really effective in certain situations, particularly if you're treating the immune system, the endocrine system, the nervous system, those homeostatic mechanisms. They can be really susceptible to little tweaks and alterations. So little drop doses for young children, and then build up from there. I can't give you a specific this age this, that age that, because as well as that, sometimes I vary a little bit depending on the child in front of me, just like an adult. Is this a robust terrier-round child, or is it a fragile, delicate little thing? I quite like as well giving teas where I can with children, or syrups and cordials and things rather than tinctures anyway, wherever appropriate. I find that works better. yeah, it's just a better thing. So I will give a tea actually quite often rather than and say, oh, put a bit of juice in it if you want to, or whatever you want to do it. I don't care. As long as you get it in you, I don't care. Make lollies with it. It's fine. And yeah, kids respond well to teas, particularly when they can take part in the blending. Yeah. Have you, Anita, you got any specific?
I wish there was something easy to say about dosage.
Yeah, there isn't really.
Mary's whole dissertation at MSc level was on dosage. And if only there was something simple. And there are sort of people have desperately tried to create, tables on dosage. But even as Mary said, with adults, it's the same problem. It's not always clear to say what. I think, though, with the sort of 15 herbs that we cover in the book and in the course, there is something you could say about those herbs, because they are so friendly. They are such good human allies that you can operate within a sort of it'd be very difficult to do yourself any harm with them.
Absolutely. You'd get sick of it way before you'd do yourself any harm.
And sometimes I think it's true to say that people just aren't taking enough of a herb, and so it is important to have a therapeutic dose, whatever that might be. And it also depends on the scenario, which is a reason why it's important to have a slightly less than basic knowledge of the body, so that you can ascertain, is this a scenario that needs robust treatment, or actually not? I was thinking of, however, of things like putting garlic on your feet, on the soles of your feet, and it's a brilliant remedy for children if they've got an earache or a chesty cough, sort of nasty bacterial infection. That, especially if the child is young enough, you can tape the peel the paper off the garlic clove and tape it to the soles of the feet, one on each side, and put a sock on, and that child will be smelly but beautifully healthy.
I was just remembering doing that. I did that with my kids, and I remember my husband coming in and being like, wow, it really smells in here, in this room.
It's therapeutic smell.
I also remember being very, very sick, and on a sort of trek once through Egypt, and through sending out my dear partner to the local market to find me anything to ease my gut spasm and terrible state, and he came back with some chamomile and fennel tea from the market, thank goodness. Now there's two herbs again, that are part of our 15 of sort of absolute stalwart remedies, and I could barely drink much of it because I was being sick, but it didn't matter. I just had mouthfuls, and with very, very quickly, within 30 minutes the cramps had eased, and by repeating the dose, then my poor tummy did actually stop ejecting everything from it. Forgive my graphic description. But yeah, so what I did was have lots and lots and lots of sips. So I drank nothing but that tea for sort of 48 hours. But they were only tiny sips that made the difference. So what's that? That's a kind of curious dose, isn't it? It's lots of it, but in tiny amounts. And it was just a tea. Fascinating.
Teas are way more powerful than people give them credit for. I do, wherever possible, prescribe teas for adults as well as children. Sometimes, particularly as you were saying there, Anita, the gut and the kidneys and the bladder, teas are like, might as well just give a tea, really. Again, depending on what you're doing, but teas are so powerful. But people sometimes think, oh, she's just giving me a tea because it's if you're feeling that way inclined. But it's not. It's a very specific therapeutic tool in its own right. And I think people are so used to just going to the supermarkets and buying some sort of fruit tea off the thing and thinking, and not you know, they're not exposed to proper medicinal teas, and they don't realise the full benefits that can be had.
I was going to say one other thing as well, yeah, that often children have tummy ache, don't they? And you know, but actually they're sort of sickening with a bit of an infection. But it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Vox, about that we cover the lymphatic system, you know, in the course and in the book in great detail, because we have lymphatic vessels all the way through our digestive system. It's a really important part. It's they're anterior or in front of the spinal column, and they're also throughout the gut. And so often a child has a tummy ache, but it's actually their lymph sort of trying to actually exercise an immune response. And so actually giving ease to that, so again putting medicine in through the digestive system can be one way of accessing, improving the immune response, easing the lymphatic discomfort, easing the child's tummy ache. But it's, do you see, it's sort of lots of things all joined together. It's so you're not looking for tummy ache cures, you actually sort of, in a very one-dimensional sense, you're maybe combining 3 or 4 herbs, maybe some cleavers, some chamomile, but then you might also put something like hyssop or thyme that was anti-infective. You might combine these herbs with, and then put that in a lovely gloopy marshmallow, just to help the whole thing permeate out through the membranes of the gut into the lymphatics, giving great ease, but also modulating the immune system.
Can I just add, what are your thoughts on glycerin, like using glycerin as a menstruum? Because is it quite a processed product, or do you think it's, I don't know?
Do you know, I'm asking myself that question as well, because I've sort of not really used it very much, but there's a great resurgence and interest in it again, isn't there? As a sugar-free, supposedly, you know, option, sweetener. I don't know, what do you think?
I've used, so that's just, but I'm seeing a lot of recipes for it, so I was just wondering.
Yeah, no, I rarely use it. I think there's one ribes, which is blackcurrant leaf, and it's a little adrenal tonic, and that specifically uses a glycerite, and I've bought that a few times in that form. It does taste lovely, I have to say, but I have, other than that, I've not been inspired to use, you know, I'd stick to tinctures basically, because I've never found any reason specifically not to, you know, on that level. I suppose it, you know, you've raised another issue with it there actually as well, Rox. You know, is it a very processed product? But I suppose quite a lot of things are, aren't they? But and also I think one of the things I notice about it is you need about 60% of it to preserve a juice. You know, so if you made a tea, or you extracted a juice from a herb, you'd need a good 60% of pure glycerol to make that preserve adequately. And so that means your end product is actually quite weak in the herb, I would say. That hasn't stopped me though. I'm really interested in the idea of using glycerol, and I have been experimenting with it for this winter actually, and sort of, but I think what I might find myself doing is mixing a glycerol with an extract with, say, a vinegar extract, and then also mixing that perhaps with a tincture. So you end up lowering the alcohol, although it is a tiny amount of alcohol really, once you end up with your dose of tincture. But then you'd have these sort of multiple ways of both preserving but also administering your medicine. And I like that idea.
You know, I was actually reading about that in a lot of American herbalists were talking about making their cordials like that with like a herb sugar or herb honey extract, and then with a herbal tea, and then the herbal tincture as well. And I was thinking it's quite nice to get all the different aspects. And they were saying, because it's you're putting it into water then as well, and so it's such a small amount that they don't have a problem giving it to children.
Yeah, I think also you can, I love the idea of using vinegars, and that old recipe, an oxymel, a honey and vinegar extract of a herb. But you could use, I love the idea of mixing things. And if we look back in our old pharmacopoeias, even here in the UK, you go back to sort of the 1950s and you've got glycerol extracts, or glycertractors as they were called, and you've got lots of vinegar recipes, or acitractors as they were called. And then so you've got these sort of wonderful products that can be, I love the idea of then combining them. So with perhaps, as you say, a honey syrup or something, or you could use any one of those sweetening things. I'm a big fan of molasses, and I think that molasses is both beneficial, but it does have that bitter sweetness that makes it more palatable.
Well, that's great. I don't actually have any more questions. That was great. Thank you very much.
Oh,
If you have anything that you want to add, or any kind of plugs that you want to make for any of your stuff?
Just going back to the book again, we are doing an online book launch, aren't we, Anita, in September, or Eon, the publishers, are organising it for us, which we're very much looking forward to. It'll be nice, because I suppose the fact it's online, lots of people will be able to join in. So obviously we'll be giving people information about that sooner rather than later, and we'll certainly will be passing that on. I just want to say it's been so lovely actually to do this. It's been, and thank you for inviting us. It's been a real pleasure to sit here and chat on. Well, it always is about herbal medicine. It's always a pleasure to chat on. But thank you very much for inviting us. And yes, I hope you enjoy the book, Rox.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks so very much for having us part of I love your enthusiasm for herbs, and just the way that you're promoting herbal medicine and the idea of just plants within your community. It's just really inspiring, actually. And I suppose I just wanted to say, a big thanks to Heartwood Online Learning. They offer a foundation course, as you know yourself, but they're also beginning to develop a plants and health course, which is really exciting. And then, of course, they do a professional course if you're a real glutton for punishment. The option to train to be a medical herbalist, and we need more medical herbalists.
We do.
Because actually, it's not just about filling efficacy gaps in conventional medicine, but actually doctors, once they realise how well herbalists are trained, it would so help the way that we offer medicinal services here in the UK. Actually, if herbal medicine was part of menopause care, mother and baby care, IBS protocols, treatment of migraine. Oh my goodness, we have so much to offer.
A lot to offer. But the other side of that as well, and it's really, really important, and I'm going to say thank you again, Rox, is just getting the message out there to people about herbal medicine. It can help you on all levels, be it consult a professional herbalist or just find out more about what you can do to help yourself. And things like this are really so important about, in terms of reaching people. So well done.
You. Sorry, just before you go, can you tell me the name of that book that you said again about the folklore in Britain? I think you said
yeah, that's Allen and Hatfield. I'm staring sideways because I've got it on the shelf, and I will remember it then. Bear with me a second. Oh, what's it called? I had it in my hand about 10 minutes ago. I will have to email it to you, but I definitely will email it to you probably within the next 10 minutes. Sorry about that.
Just trying to write down the book that you'd said.
Yeah, I can't remember the title either, for goodness sake. But yeah, it's somewhere in our references list in that book, actually.
It is.
All right.
Yeah, it's Gabrielle Hatfield and something wonderful.
Somebody Allen, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, it's so annoying.
Oh, mind.
It's not going to leap off the shelf.
As soon as you go off the call, you'll find.
Yeah, it'll just fall off the shelf all by itself.
Yeah.
Plonk.
Oh. Okay.
Okay.
Very much. I've just seen my cat's really restless. I think I've locked her in. I need to let her out.
Oh, oh don't, yeah. Don't neglect your poor cat. All right. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.